What day are you guys watching this video on? You don't have to say anything, it's fine. But just know that whatever day you are watching it on, this video was filmed the day before that.
Yeah, right.
So,
I don't know where he gets this stuff.
We're going to do part 2 of a video that we did a while back.
On the Lost Dungeon of Tonisborg.
You may remember the previous video. These are not being filmed, one right after the other.
On the same day.
On the same day, within the same hour-long period. Absolutely
That's what you were
not.
getting at. He's trying to imply that we just filmed this like the day before you're watching this.
Yep, because that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not good to lie.
I'm not lying, I'm misleading.
Okay, fine.
Let her rip! You're probably here because you saw part 1. As such, we're not going to do too much introduction into what we're talking about today. If you don't know, go back and watch the first video. This will give us more time to just talk about the goodies that are contained within the Lost Dungeons of Tonisborg.
Well, Tonisborg.
Tonisborg.
I will explain it real quick.
Go ahead.
Not much, though. This is the Lost Dungeon of Tonisborg. It was a Kickstarter that I supported back in 2023. This is 2024. It's got some really good stuff in it regarding how to play a game in an old school style. And I mean, that's only part of it, but it's a really interesting part of it. And so this second video is part of an ongoing series where we're looking at what is brought up in the Lost Dungeon of Tonisborg. We're calling it Wisdom of Tonisborg, or Tonisborg Wisdom. Just to give you an idea, again, of the way things were played back in the day and the way we think that things can still be played in modern role-playing games.
Yes.
So let's just jump right in where we left off.
Let's.
And again, like Alexander was saying, if you have not watched the first one, shut this one off, go back and watch the first one.
Go check it out. Chances are it's recommended if you're on a computer over there.
Yeah.
If that worked, that's pretty cool.
Okay, so we finished the last one talking about, we focused an awful lot on the information here that relates to Dungeon Master player relations.
Yeah.
But we're going to go on to some of the more nuts and bolts some of the more nuts and bolts parts of the Lost Dungeons of Tonisborg. Hints and information that is included in this book. We talked a little bit about under the heading "Keep dropping hints to help your players learn." This is one of the things for if you have a bunch of brand new people learning to play the game. This is a good place to start. Let's look at the base defense scenario. Adventurers need to stop and rest while adventuring. If an unlucky wandering monster roll calls for an encounter while they are resting, the tables may get turned. The players are now dealing with a possible attack. They may discover that dead-end passages and rooms are not good places to take a rest. If the monsters are too powerful, there is no avenue for escape. And again, as a referee, it's okay to make comments when you see players doing something stupid, such as, "Are you sure you want to camp out where there is no second route of escape?" And, "Were you going to post a lookout?" Now,
you go first.
Okay. I completely agree with this for new novice players.
Yes.
I am perfectly fine with saying, "You sure you want to do that?" Or like they say here, "Were you going to post a lookout?" But at this stage in your playing, I don't cut those breaks.
No.
It is very much, you don't post a lookout, that's on you. If you end up getting yourself into a dead end where you can't escape something that's coming at you that's way too powerful, should have thought it through. I don't give those breaks anymore. But again, for the novice players, you bet. Because you're teaching them how to play the game. You're teaching them what they need to be aware of. But for you older long-time players, no.
Yeah, and that's basically exactly what I was going to say. I think that when people are starting out, it's very easy to get discouraged when playing this game. There are a lot of things that I think can push new players away, whether that's the length of the rule books, the complexity of the actual rules, if you do follow the rules and read the books and figure everything out, or if it's just trying to figure out the dynamic of that relationship that we've been talking about, because it's a difficult game to explain to somebody
Yes.
who's never played it before.
Yes.
You take on this persona, you're playing a character, you're becoming something that you're not. It's kind of tough to figure out. And so if they do figure all of those things out and then they get killed the first, 2 or 3 times they play the game, even the first time, one time they play the game in an inexplicable way, there's a good chance they'll never come back and try it again.
I've had that happen.
Yeah, so have I. So I think that if you do kind of lead some of those decisions of okay, are you sure that this is something you want to do, and explain out in a very logical way why they need to start thinking about some of these things, then they'll start to change the way they think. And that's kind of the challenge with starting out here.
Yeah.
And if you can help that along, that's great, because then you're encouraging somebody to play the game.
Well, and I think that there needs to be some break-in time for anybody. Anytime you start to play with a new player, even if they're experienced, you need to give them a little bit of break-in time. And I'm talking maybe an hour here. You need to give them a little bit of break-in time to get used to you and how you run your game. Because I know some old school players who would not be as hardcore about you posting a guard or not being in that dead-end dungeon. So it just might be something that they're not used to. But that can usually be taken care of in the first 20 minutes to a half hour of playing with a new player.
And especially over multiple sessions. Once you get to session 3 or 4, then you should have it figured out. And then you can still have those, like we talked about last time, little hints that something's going wrong, but less explicit in how you explain them to them.
Yeah, right. That's good.
Yeah.
That's very good. Another thing that they bring in here, and this is just kind of a side note that they brought in, talking about how you can sometimes make it easier for players to get through those early levels. In our games, we use an old house rule called binding wounds. After a combat, clerics can bind other players' wounds, thus healing them for 1 to 4 points. Each wounded player can only have this done once at the end of each combat. Since a player at 0 hit points is unconscious and anyone at negative points is either dead or dying, we do that they're dead if you get to -1. This rule allows for characters to be brought back from the brink of death with a lucky roll. In other words, a player is at -2 hit points. The cleric binds her wounds and rolls a 3. The character is now just barely alive. Considering how weak first level characters are, you may want to try this in your own game. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And we've never done that. We use something called Hurt Loam. And it's available in a lot of our campaigns. It comes from the Thomas Covenant series. But Hurt Loam, if you have access to that, a cleric can be carrying that. They can smear Hurt Loam on a wound to make it heal to a certain extent. But I've never just done binding wounds, and I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. I don't think there's any reason you wouldn't necessarily do it. Well, I mean, if your arm's off, then sure, that's a different circumstance. But that's all I had to say.
That's all. Yeah, you just want to throw in that arm thing. Throw in some graphic
violence,
graphic visuals, mental visuals.
Yeah.
Okay, then it moves on to remember that you are an entertainer. And again, this is information for the Dungeon Master. Didn't mean to pop that off there, but
His sticky notes are falling off.
They're just falling. The sticky's not on my sticky notes. Something that rarely gets talked about in dungeon game rules is that as a referee, you will take many roles. And the most important role is as the entertainer. Everyone involved should have a fun time playing, even if their characters are getting killed in the game. So even if you're a deadly dungeon master, you need to do it in an entertaining way, which I actually agree with.
I agree as well.
If you get killed in a boring way, nobody cares. It's not fun. But if you get killed in a really interesting, fascinating way, sometimes we still talk. You've heard us talk. The old guys. You've heard us talk about character deaths from 35 years ago. I think we talk about the deaths,
I've heard the
not about
same
the
stories.
Exactly.
Probably 20 times
And there's
for a lot of these guys. Every time.
And the older we get, the more we retell those.
Do you remember when sprinting into the skull, hell-bent for leather?
That's one of them right there.
Yeah, most of that.
And there is still bad feeling toward the dungeon master about that event.
Genuine anger.
Oh yeah, and that was 30 years ago, and they're still like, that shouldn't have happened.
That was a bunch of crap.
That was terrible.
Stupid.
Although it's funny because it's a split crew.
Yeah.
Because half of the crew that was there was like, no, that was totally legitimate.
No, that was fine. You shouldn't have done that.
You shouldn't have run into that skull the way you did. And the other half's like, no, you should have told us something about it. So I'm off the hook because it's a split party, and I think I wouldn't have changed it, but I actually really enjoyed it when it happened.
Oh yeah, because he's a sadist.
Now, something else here. The referee must keep in mind that the players are playing exceptional personas. These are brave adventurers. Players do not appreciate having their character killed in ways that do not allow them to try to avoid dying. And that's extremely important.
Yes.
I have never, since probably 1978 when I first started running a dungeon, since 1979, I have never not had some escape mechanism for death in my campaign. Never have done it. Sometimes it's really difficult to find. Sometimes if you don't pay attention 3 turns before you encounter the dangerous situation, you won't escape. But there's always a way to get away from the deadly things that I put in my campaign. And as you've said before on the channel, within, I don't care what level you are, I don't care how powerful you are, there's something within about a 5 mile radius that can kill you.
Yeah.
So players have learned to pay attention to what is going on around them. And a big part of this, and I think that they address this in one of these sections here later on, a big part of this is you need to pay attention to what's going on around you in the wilderness or in the dungeon, because using those materials that are presented to you in the dungeon or the wilderness, that's how you're going to get past the obstacles. It's not going to be from looking at your character sheet. It's going to be what I have left for you to find and make use of to get past whatever obstacle, again, that I put in front of you.
And that's why I think that preparation is so important on the parts of those who are DMing the game. If you just go in blind, or you just have kind of haphazardly thrown together a dungeon, while you can do that, for longer drawn-out campaigns that players are really going to remember and they're really going to love, there does have to be a degree of preparation there. So, like he's saying, even if they do die, you're more frustrated with the fact that you didn't figure out a way around it. Or you made a stupid decision, as opposed to the situation just being what kills you. Because, well, if the situation weren't there, you'd be fine. It's more self-reflection. People who are mad, they're mad at themselves.
Right, because they screwed up.
Because they didn't look closely enough or think deeply enough about something.
So, it goes on to say, just following up on that same thing, if you have a couple of nasty hidden traps, that's okay. But if in every hallway you have end up saying something like, you fell in a pit and died, you as the DM have gone too far. Yeah. I fully understand that.
You and your group of nerds fall into a pit of dynamite and
you blow up.
The end.
Yeah. So let's roll up new characters, and most people at that time, most people are going to say, let's play a different game.
Let's play something else. How about chess?
Yeah. Again, I'll go on to this one more time. Most situations should allow a player to make some kind of saving throw or have some kind of opportunity to escape. It has become common in RPGs for the story to dictate the turn of events and for certain situations to necessarily occur. The inescapable ambush or trap is a common trope. In the original style of gaming, that should never be the case. Players probably won't mind having their characters fall for a trap or be killed if it was the result of their own actions. But the referee who arbitrarily kills off characters without any chance to escape their fate may well find themselves staring at an empty table.
Yeah.
Really good advice. Mm-hmm. Players running monsters. Totally new subject here. Another option for keeping a player involved after their character bites the dust in the dungeon dust, is to give them some monsters to run. And I have never done this.
I was going to say.
I need to do this. This is one of those things where I thought, that's a really good idea. And of course, it's a no-brainer, but I just never have done it.
Yeah.
Players controlling key monster bad guys and their minions was a common practice for the Blackmore Bunch. In other words, Dave Arneson's playing group. The Twin City players experienced firsthand how letting a player control dungeon denizens can really enliven a game, and you know that's going to happen.
Oh, man.
Enliven a game and be a fun challenge for everyone. Not only does it take some of the burden off the referee's shoulders and free them to concentrate on other aspects of play, it gives the monster player the opportunity to employ the monsters creatively and to try their best to outwit their friends, with the DM being the impartial judge. I think it's an excellent
really
idea.
good idea.
And I think Bill has wanted to do this. I think Bill has, in a way, gone down that road. Mm-hmm. I'm not exact. I'll have to find out some details and see if we actually did that or not.
Well, that could
or if we just talked about it.
Oh, we did. I remember. I know what you're talking about. But I think that it is cool because we're big believers in when we play the game. Most of the discussion of what the characters are doing is discussed openly over the table with everybody that's there. But the option always does exist. And it's used a lot for the players themselves to communicate with the DM privately. And now that's mostly just us texting whoever's doing the DMing and saying, I'm going to have my guy do this, when you don't want everybody else to know.
Sometimes it's nefarious. Sometimes it's actually for the benefit of the party.
Exactly.
You don't want player so-and-so to do it because maybe you're suspicious of player so-and-so.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons to do it. But I think that if this was an option, if you suddenly you take control of a powerful vampire that's deeper down in the dungeon, they might not know exactly what's going on. There's a lot of cool ways. Yes. I really like this idea.
This is cool. But again, I think that the key to it is, number one, you've got to have a player that is going to play within the confines. Within the confines and within the spirit of the campaign that you're in.
Sure.
And then they have to be willing to say, I don't know if the DM, whose campaign this is, I need to make sure that it's okay with them that if I do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think that this is a really cool thing that we need to start implementing a little bit more often. If a player gets killed, they get to take over the Balrog. I mean, it can be a fun thing.
No, that doesn't sound fun.
Yeah, we hate that. Okay, going on to stretching the rules for the players. One of the major points of contention between players and the referee is the issue of hard rulings. This is when a referee does not allow a player to do something because the rules say so. Well, this is a fantasy game, and everyone should be free to explore this fantasy side of this game. An example is many players don't like having their wizards limited to fighting only with a dagger, often citing literary sources. Gandalf used a magic sword, etc., etc. We've changed these rules all the time. I mean, as we've talked on previous videos, the number of rules that we use is so minimal, because I am always happy if a player can come up to me and say, I think that my character should be able to do this because of this. If it sounds logical to me, I'm going to go with it. And they may have to give something up to get that particular benefit. But at the same time, I don't want to say, no, you can't do that. I'm not going to give everything that somebody asks for. I'll say, yeah, you can do this, but you can't do that. But you should be able to can do this, no matter what the thing is, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and to
within reason.
To reemphasize, when he says the number of rules that we use is minimal, the number of hard and fast, no adjustment rules is minimal. In the manuals themselves, we do use a lot of things for particularly inspiration. If you go back and watch the videos we've made talking about all the different manuals, they do have some sort of influence. But like you said, the actual you can and can't do this, like no one can use poison except for assassins, and you have to be evil to use poison. But we don't use them. That's out the window. Yeah. There's no reason for that.
So going to this stretching of the rules, let's talk a little more about Dave Arneson, because that's where so much of the spirit of the Dungeon of Tonisborg came from, was Dave Arneson's style of play. At the very start of Dave Arneson's Blackmoor, one of the players asked to become a vampire, and Arneson found a way to make it work. Other characters played Balrogs, sometimes working with the other players and sometimes against them. The original style rules presented in this book, talking about the Lost Dungeon of Tonisborg, they have a slightly separate set of rules. This isn't exactly 0D&D. This is their own rule set. The original style rules presented in this book allow a great deal of freedom in how characters are detailed. This is unlike many contemporary games in which there is a lot of talk about character balance, and there are many rules meant to achieve it to the point that it becomes confusing and artificial. Reality isn't balanced, and a good fantasy shouldn't be either. So, and this is something that we have talked about ad nauseum. People who say that, well, if you play this style of game, it throws the game out of balance. We don't believe in balance. Sometimes you're in the driver's seat. Sometimes you're standing in the road as the cart barrels down the road toward you.
Yeah.
There is no balance. Sometimes you survive, sometimes you don't. It's really based on your action, not on your character.
And for those of you who have yelled at us angrily in the comments saying that this isn't real, it's fantasy, we do know that.
Yeah,
we are aware.
We do understand that.
We do understand this concept. But what we mean is that we want to try and we've talked many times about how our characters aren't superheroes.
Right.
You're just a person. You're just a guy, and how you use that person is completely up to you. But you have to build into something powerful.
Yes.
It's based in some semblance of what we view as reality, logic, making yourself equal to the things that are around you. And if you want to become greater than that, you have to do it yourself. So that's what we...
Your achievements.
Yeah,
your achievements are what you have to achieve.
Yeah.
You're not going to be given, you have to achieve. That's the way we like to play the game.
Yes.
You might disagree, but that's the style of play.
That's what we mean.
And we find it very rewarding to play it that way.
Because when you accomplish cool stuff, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, because that's the stuff you talk about for 30 years. But if you like playing it the other way, where you start out powerful and you just maintain power, that's okay.
It's fine. We've done that too, and it's fun.
Depending on the game that we play, sometimes that is the norm. But when we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, this is the way we like to play it, and it's the way that we enjoy it most.
Yes.
Which leads us to the next section called Your Characters Create Themselves. And this is something, again, we have talked about on the channel. One complaint frequently voiced against old school RPGs is that there is barely any variety in the character classes. You have only 3 or 4 types to play, and they all have identical abilities, in other words, characteristics, strength, intelligence, wisdom, etc., and little in the way of customized add-ons like feats and skills or what have you. We are here to say that's poppycock, and I tend to agree. Here is something everyone needs to understand about traditional gaming. You don't need rules to customize your character. A real person isn't defined by rules. A real person is defined by who they are, and in this case, and in terms of an RPG, how they play. If you want to play a warrior who is a loyal friend that will protect her comrades to the death, then play that character. You don't need to have that on your character sheet. It's just who you make your character become. As a referee, consider that players begin as low-level nobodies or flunkies. They need to survive adventures and grow into their characters. And yet, if a player is fixated on being something special, let's say they want to be a tracker or a woodsman type of persona, by all means do not stop them. Instead, have them literally be that persona and encourage them to play it out. Yeah. But you don't need to have specific stats to be able to do that. You don't need to have feats or skills to be able to do that. You just say, here's what I want to be. And I would love it if I could be a tracker. And when you start doing tracking things, you as a DM, your responsibility is to come up with a rule set, not even a rule set, a suggestions set to mitigate people being able to accomplish certain tasks. And usually that's easily done just by using dexterity, wisdom, and intelligence, and strength. Yeah. Any of those core basic traits can be used and turned in different ways to figure out if somebody's successful at something they want to try and accomplish, no matter what that thing might be. Yeah. Again, like we've been saying this whole time, you're playing a character in a story. When you're doing this, again, collective storytelling, like we were saying in the last episode. This isn't necessarily, we don't view it as a game. This is a lifestyle. But you are playing one small part in an overall world that's being created. Sometimes what's going on is about your character, and sometimes it's not. And you have to be able to balance those two things pretty equally. Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. Part 2 of The Wisdom of Tonisborg, our series, The Wisdom of Tonisborg. Indeed. We've really enjoyed this book. It was available on Kickstarter, like I said, back in 2023. I don't know if it's available out in the world right now. If I can find that out, I will put that in the description of the video. But a lot of fun, we think, and if there's continued interest in this, we will continue to bring forward The Wisdom of Tonisborg to you in this multi-part series. Aside from that, we want to give a shout out to our Patreon subscribers. Yeah. They are fantastic people who are helping us to maintain this channel. And we really appreciate their being here. If you want to become a Patreon subscriber or member or supporter, whatever the term is for that, know that we give them perks whenever we get the opportunity. We mentioned in the last video that on our recent Kickstarter, we gave free PDFs of all the elements of our Kickstarter to our Patreon subscribers. Yep. We also have extra videos there, and we have more in-depth conversations with the people who support us on Patreon. Yes. So if you're interested, go take a look. The information for that will be in the description down below. But there you go. There you go. Just to close out, we might say some things in this one. There's just a lot of things we probably said that some could construe as somewhat controversial. We're not trying to be accusatory in the way that anybody plays their game. We're just talking about from our perspective the way we play our game. But at the end of the day, it's a game. Play it how you want. As long as you're getting around the table, that's what's important. Yes. But this is the way that we like to play, and we would encourage people who do not play this way to give it a try. To give it a go. It's a lot of fun. Yep.
So that's all we've got.
I'm Jim.
I'm Alex.
Keep it short on free.
Bye-bye.